Look at all that money, yeah, the money that they spent. Take another look now and take some time for hemp. I know cut trees for paper, cause it hurts the environment. Stop deforestation, yeah, it's time for hemp. Whoa, an acre of hemp makes 20 barrels of oil. No need for pesticides to poison all our soil. People got no food, they got no clothes, they got no rent. Well, right now it's time for hemp.
Thank you for taking Time for Hemp. I'm your host, Casper Leitch. You are listening to Time for Hemp on Tumblr, SoundCloud, iTunes, and iHeartRadio. We are the only 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week broadcasting network on iHeartRadio that is all cannabis all the time. And like a good joint, we are best when shared with friends. It is Wednesday, and on Wednesday, we like to put a spotlight on all the amazing people at LEAP, LEAP.cc, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. I would encourage you to check out their website and find a speaker to help educate the minds in the community you live in. Don't forget, anytime you hear the word joint on the Big Joint broadcast, nearly 2.5 million people all around the world pack their bongs, their vaporizers, their pipes, and of course twist up their joints to take Time for Hemp. With that said, I'm going to pass this joint chat to my joint host for a good joint conversation with our joint friend here on the joint broadcast, and be quiet and smoke my joint here in the joint while my friends talk to you about all the great joint events happening in the world. Your Honor?
Well, I am happy to say that I am packing to go visit one of what I understand to be one of the most beautiful spots on the planet, right up the road from me, which is Canyonlands, Bryce, Capitol Reef, places in between. Well, that's the good news.
What makes it so beautiful? Sunrises, the mountainsides, the hills. Is Julie Andrews there singing out loud, or what?
The rock formations, the petroglyphs, the hydroglyphs. I understand the Anastasis have quite a large amount of for-rent vacant real estate called the Ruins.
Okay.
So we're going to go visit the Anastasi ruins, and it's just one thing after another. But there is a shortcoming. When I am sitting in the middle of a trail, in the middle of one of the most amazing rock sites on the planet, do you realize I can't sit there and legally smoke a fucking joint? Pardon me, FCC, I didn't say that. Do you believe I can't smoke a bleep joint?
Wow.
I mean, come on.
It's federal land. It's federal land. That's the problem with the federal government interference in our lives.
Yep.
And it's Utah.
Yep.
Double whammy, although we hear rumors of progress in Utah. Today, enough of my personal packing challenges. I wonder how long edibles last. If I eat 1,000 milligrams and understand that I don't need the ER, will that last all week? I don't think so. In any event, our guest today is very special. Diane Goldstein has been, continues to be, and should continue to be, for good reason, one of LEAP's favorite, most effective, most outstanding speakers. She keeps track. She keeps on top of it. She spends more than every waking minute devoting her life to the cause. So let me continue by saying, Diane, welcome and thank you. Thank you for your work.
You know what, Lenny? First off, I'm obviously very, very humbled because the only reason I think all of us are where we're at is because of people like you and Casper and, so many other grassroots activists that really made this issue a human rights issue and a civil rights issue. And I think no matter what anyone's stance on drugs is we can all agree that the drug war has been the biggest failure from a policy perspective in America, and that it really, really needs to be, pushed back.
It does strike me that as far as grassroots issues go, this is the most grassroots issue in my 64 years that has been so aptly named.
Yeah, no pun intended.
Oh, every pun intended. I'm just marvel. Diane, what brought you to LEAP? What brought you to LEAP?
It's been a very, very interesting journey, and I think, there's the professional standpoint, which is that watching the drug war from the enforcement of drug market, open-air drug markets and, drug issues in all our communities, that I saw that we were neither efficient or effective. And then from a personal standpoint, and, Casper's heard this story before, and I don't know if you have, Lenny, is that I had a brother who had some mental health issues and was dual diagnosed, and he was, what we now know, although they're no longer calling it bipolar, is he started using alcohol and drugs and tobacco at a very, very young age to self-medicate. And so I saw his struggles as a sister and from the inside of my family on how we treat people who are both potentially mentally ill and have drug issues, and saw that criminalization never worked. And he died from a drug overdose. And so I swore that I was never going to, in any way, shape, or form, is try to prevent other families from going through what our family went through.
How would you have been saved? And let me back up. I am sorry, sincerely, my sympathy for the loss of your brother. Different things brought us to this war. Unfortunately, some of us are brought here because of the casualties. How is it, if I may ask, that your brother might have been saved?
Well, I think,
war.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. Is, one of the things, from a perspective of, if it wasn't for my husband and his generosity, and who had many connections to people that brother employed or that we employed him, is his felony conviction prevented him from being employable. And so, that's one of the issues that is of paramount is, we have created a class issue by criminalizing drug use that no one will hire people who have felony convictions. And Jack Cole, our founder, really has said it, is you can get over an addiction, but you can never get over a conviction. But once you have the first felony conviction, is you are forever stigmatized by the criminal justice system, who basically looks at you and says, oh, you know what, you deserve to be in prison. And so there's no connection or understanding, even though that's starting to change now, and we are making some significant progress, that this is a public health issue, and we should be sinking resources into public health policy that would do more to prevent crime in our communities ever than just sending people to jail or to prison for this.
When you mentioned felony conviction, what went through my mind is an employer saying to a potential employee, oh, you only have one felony conviction? Oh, that's okay. I thought you said you had two.
I don't think it matters.
Well, that's my point.
Yeah.
That's my point. Once that hurdle is crossed, it doesn't get uncrossed.
Exactly. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And so, my brother, out of all the four siblings, really literally was the smartest one. He was, mechanical, IQ, off the charts, and he struggled his whole life, as my husband called it. My brother struggled to be Billy, and it really took me moving him back into our house and him living with us for several years, where I saw, the almost attempts into suicide and the mental health and the depression and the anxiety, and I look at, what caused his overdose was actually psychotropic medication, and
one of the antipsychotics.
Yes. Yes, within combination of alcohol. And if my brother would have been allowed to use medical marijuana legally and not be stigmatized by it, and if the psychiatrist and the psychologist that he saw would have recognized that maybe there are other ways to deal with issues, maybe, I'm not saying he would be alive, but, he had, long years of sobriety, and then the system intervened when he fell off the wagon.
Did he, if you can answer this, did he have any direct experience with marijuana as a medication?
No, he didn't use marijuana as a medication because he had he was on his health insurance, as he had been told very specifically that if he in fact uses marijuana, that he would lose his health insurance or his benefits and would be subject to criminalization during those last few years when he was on probation.
So in this situation, we just don't even know if this harmless medication might or might not have been a magic bullet, as we have seen it for other people at times.
Sure, and that's, I think, the importance of a lot of the stuff that's happening right now, especially on the federal level. If you look at, the Carreras Act with Senator Rand Paul and Cory Booker, that talks about descheduling marijuana. Now, the only thing I don't like about that bill is it would put it into a Schedule 2.
Let's talk about that for a moment. The distinction, if I may interrupt, would you please explain, because it's so critically important, why we are now saying D-E, as in do it, D-E, deschedule, and we are no longer using the wrong word, reschedule.
Yes, and that's correct. And so currently, most people understand that cannabis is a Schedule 1 drug. And Schedule 1 drugs include other drugs that the DEA and NIDA and other folks have stated have no medical efficacy. And one of Leitch's positions is that we could and should blow up all of Schedule 1, because if you look at the science and you start seeing a lot of the private research going out of Rick Doblin's group and MAPS, is there's heroin-assisted treatment programs over in Europe. We know that can be used safely in a medical capacity. There's ecstasy and LSD and other psychedelics being used to treat PTSD. There's marijuana that's being used to treat PTSD and a bunch of other health issues. And the biggest problem has been is that currently, with it being in Schedule 1, is that's kind of the crux of the message. Oh, it's Schedule 1, is marijuana's dangerous. We can't, decriminalize or make it legal because of its level of danger. Yet, because it's in Schedule 1, we haven't according to the government, we haven't adequately researched it, but I would disagree. The two most researched drugs have been alcohol and marijuana across the world. The problem is our federal government only supports funding studies that are on the pathology of drugs, not on its efficacy. And Lenny, I don't know if you're aware of this, but NIDA funds 90% of all the research, not just in the United States, but across the world. So our taxpayer dollars are floating out across the world to ensure that the U.S. government prohibition policies are carried out.
I wish we were, I'm guessing we don't, I wish we were helping to fund the research the Israelis are doing, as far as I know, leading the world in marijuana research.
Oh, absolutely. And no, our monies are not going towards proving that marijuana is actually efficacious, even though that's starting to even change a little bit. And I think, you have people like Kevin Sabet and NIDA who are starting to remessage and rebrand their message. But they're still saying the same thing, that medical marijuana should be handled as a pharmaceutical and not as a whole plant medicine.
You're hearing silence at my end because it's better than me screaming in frustration into the microphone. That would be bad behavior. And since I'm about to light a joint, I know people that smoke behave well, so I won't scream into the microphone with frustration. But come on, give me a break. You and I know we kill, in the United States, about 900 people a year with nonsteroidal anti-inflammatory, over-the-counter aspirin-type drugs.
Oh,
we know this, 1,000 people a year as opposed to 0 in all of recorded history with marijuana.
Yeah, it was really interesting is this week you had Sheila Polk, who's the Yavapai County District Attorney, that did a letter to the editor out in Arizona, and I'm trying to quickly find it. But she talked about, it's the whole lies, damn lies and drug war statistics. She said that in Arizona, marijuana contributed to the death of 62 kids, implying that 62 kids died because they smoked marijuana. But when you go back and start taking a look at the report, it was a caretaker who may have tested for marijuana. It's what she did is she skewed a public health report. So the title of her article was "Safe Pot, Tell That to the 62 Kids Who Died." It occurred. Yeah, go ahead, Lenny. I'm sorry.
On this whole, and tell me to shut up when appropriate. I'm used to it and I respond well to it. It occurs to me, one of the things that we run into over and over and over and over is the difference between two things happening and one thing being caused by another.
Sure.
And that's done all the time. Somebody dies in a car accident. We look at their blood. We find more than 0 marijuana. Therefore, marijuana caused the car accident and the fatality. Well, maybe not. It occurs to me that the one thing that is absolutely guaranteed to kill everybody every time, being born.
Oh, absolutely. No, and that's the whole science, causation versus correlation and association. But I think it calls into question that, here you have a publicly elected official who is spending taxpayer dollars trying to not allow criminal justice reform, and her information is based on really mischaracterizations of the facts. But we're starting to win, and it's changing because this last week is you had the head of the Colorado Marijuana Enforcement Division, or, Friedman, who was out in Massachusetts, and he was talking about the public health perspective and what's been occurring in Colorado. And what he said was really interesting. Look, we're starting to get data, and it's very encouraging from a public health perspective. What he noted is, there was a slight decrease, although not statistically significant, in kids using marijuana. There really was no uptick in adults using marijuana, and although there are people that are driving, not necessarily under the influence of marijuana, is drug fatalities, marijuana-related fatalities, and all traffic fatalities are down in Colorado, as well as DUIs. And so here you actually have a public official who is being honest and saying, yeah, there's some warts. And we can all recognize that there have been some warts in the implementation of any type of new program. But Colorado has very successfully said, we've been able to regulate this substance in a manner that is not creating public health issues or public safety issues.
One thing that we have to keep in mind, and you just reminded me of it, over many, many, many years, we have lots of statistics showing the causation, relationship between alcohol in the blood above certain fixed levels and increased traffic accidents and increased traffic deaths. That's something we're pretty confident of. What we are seeing now is fooling us. Here's what I mean. If we had taken every single one of those historic alcohol-related traffic deaths, and in every one of those cases had drawn blood and tested for THC, The reality is we have no clue what we would have found. We didn't test for it. Now, everything, whether it's a DUI, whether it's an accident, doesn't matter what it is, we're seeing the box checked off that says, check for THC. Well, guess what? They're finding some pot. What that does not tell us is what the newspapers, some of the Sabbats of the world, not him personally, I'm not sure, but the Sabbats of the world are telling us, therefore, the marijuana is now all of a sudden that it's available legally is causing all these fatalities.
Correct.
They're forgetting two things. One, they never looked for it before, so we have nothing to compare it to. Two, we have no way so far of saying that the cannabis did or did not contribute to the accident. And I had a third really cool point, but I'm not thinking of what it is. I better wait a minute so it's not short-term memory.
I've got a third point, and that is we're going to pay our bills, and we're going to listen to a couple of ads here, and then we're going to jam out to a song about how fantastic marijuana is, and then come back and pick up where we left off here at Time for Hemp. You are listening to the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. Please share us with your friends.
THCF Medical Clinics are the premier physicians clinic in the United States. THCF has offices all across the United States from Hawaii to Michigan. THCF Medical Clinics has helped approximately 150,000 patients obtain their medical marijuana permits to legally possess, grow, and use medical marijuana. If you have chronic pain, multiple sclerosis, or any other neurological degenerative disease, or if you have any gastrointestinal disorders such as GERD, irritable bowel syndrome, or if you have AIDS, cancer, spastic disorders, seizure disorders, or glaucoma, call us at 1-800-723-0188 or visit us online at hemp.org. Again, the number is 1-800-723-0188 and the site is hemp.org. Ganja.
Some may say, why they take my choice? My way of life is my freedom's voice. If the government cared about your health, cigarettes and liquor be off the shelf. Propaganda feeds the hungry beast. The government is best, which governs least. We said, some we say, ganja. We say, ganja. Some may say, why they take my choice? Back in the day, the people had no voice. 1937, the FBI, Harry and Slinger and some shady men. They locked the Congress saying marijuana kills. Cause hemp fathers sent the hit from pills. We said, some we say, ganja. We say, ganja.
That was Echo Movement we were listening to here on the Time for Hemp Broadcasting Network. I am Casper Leitch, your host of the Time for Hemp show. And we have as our joint host today, Judge Lenny Frieling, with our joint guest today, Diane Goldstein, here on Time for Hemp. I will pass the conversation back to you. Thank you, and I'm hitting my joint.
Diane, hi, welcome back. I think it's the official way that the pros do it. So we should do it that way because we're pros.
Perfect.
Yeah. So I'm a pro, want to be, you're a pro. That works. We were talking about the human impact. We were talking about some of the legal impact. And we hinted at the financial impact of people getting cash stolen. Let's take a look for a moment of an area that I know you're particularly interested in, along with the rest of the list, and that is asset forfeiture. What are we talking about? What's the macrocosm? What's the microcosm?
Well, there's criminal asset forfeiture that I believe has a legitimate place in public safety. The criminal asset forfeiture is also based on a constitutional standard and with court oversight that requires a criminal conviction. And so we should separate out the criminal conviction, criminal asset forfeiture from civil asset forfeiture.
Does anything come to mind as an example of what might be an appropriate government forfeiture criminal action?
Sure. Let's take a look at maybe some bank fraud cases. White-collar crime where you have people or an institution that have deliberately defrauded people, and as part of their criminal conviction, their assets that they profited from in this manner are seized from them and distributed back to victims or the government to pay for the investigation.
So Bernie Madoff's victims may well have properly, rationally, morally benefited from the government seizing Bernie Madoff's ill-gotten gains.
Absolutely. Or, for example, let's talk about, the mafia, or a legitimate criminal enterprise that which was, RICO laws and asset forfeiture were initially developed based on that. Civil asset forfeiture was started in the 1980s during the height of the drug war. And what's very interesting about civil asset forfeiture is that it turns the rule of law on its head, where the best way to describe it is, in a criminal proceeding, we're innocent until proven guilty. In a civil asset forfeiture proceeding, your asset, your property, real property, house, cash, or whatever, is considered guilty. So we're presuming that this inanimate object is guilty of something, and it's up to the property owner, whether they're an innocent owner or a criminal owner, to prove that that asset was not related to an ongoing criminal enterprise or to some type of crime. And so we've changed the process, and it was developed, and in fact one of the architects, I think the guy's name is John Yoder, stated this last year and talked about it, how civil asset forfeiture, when he designed it, was not meant to go to the level where it has been, where it's been used to supplant law enforcement public safety budgets. It's been used to go after, money grabs from innocent people. And he himself views the system as completely corrupted, and that civil asset forfeiture should be abolished.
What kinds of things might be taken? Let's say, for example, I am, in fact, as we speak, paying attention and packing. And I'm going to be driving a rental car with plates from who the hell knows where. And let's say, for example, I don't like credit cards much. So I take $2,000, $5,000.
So
For some people, yes.
Yeah, I'll give you 2 examples of that, Lenny.
Thank you. Yes.
Because there's some very, very great examples. So I recently testified up in both the Senate, California Senate Public Safety Committee and Appropriations Committee, and I had a story that I have a friend of mine who's a defense attorney who shared with me. He had a client who was a food truck owner driving from Northern California to Southern California with $10,000 cash to buy property down here. He gets drug interdicted on the 5 freeway by LA County Sheriff's Department plainclothes unit, which is obviously going to be a narcotics or some type of gang unit. He gets stopped. He discloses that he has this type of cash. They bring a narcotics dog who hits on the drug cash, and they seize the $10,000. Well, in California, in order for your property to be seized by local law enforcement, if you, number one, have to be convicted, if it's $25,000 or less or real property, you have to be convicted of a crime. So this innocent owner hires my friend. They go up to forfeiture court.
And by the way, real quickly, not all state and federal forfeiture laws even have an innocent owner defense. Please.
Correct. So
Please go ahead.
They go up to court, and the judge orders that the $10,000 be returned because the innocent owner was neither charged with a crime nor convicted of a crime. And once that order was done, LA County Deputy Sheriff, through the DA, tells my buddy that, oh, well, too bad. It's already been turned over to the federal government for civil asset forfeiture. And so the other point to this is the LA County Deputy Sheriff threatened the food truck owner that they were going to sick the IRS on him for having $10,000 cash to ensure that he had reported it properly on his taxes, or he could just let it go. And so here's an innocent owner who says, I don't want the IRS in my business, because none of us do, right? And he chose not to try to pursue it further in federal court. So another recent case is Amtrak. 19-year-old kid has $11,000 cash, coming on a train, headed to California to go to school. He's going to be, he's attending some type of music producer school out here in California. He gets interdicted because he's African American on the train. He's traveling on a one-way ticket with cash. And the DEA agents say, oh, they smell marijuana. They bring in the drug dog, and they take his $11,000 cash, although they've also called his mother, who says, hey, I gave him the cash. This is what it's going for. So he's trying to fight the DEA on this. And so those are the types of abuses that, very interesting, have caused some significant controversies for public safety, because you have a real bipartisan push both on the Democrat and Republican side to change this. In fact, New Mexico just signed one of the toughest civil asset forfeiture laws in their state. In California, our bill made it out of Senate on a 28-1 vote, with one member of the GOP who abstained and one Democratic senator who voted against it. But clearly we're continuing through this push that people have realized that the drug war subverts all American civil liberties.
How about rolling in this? There are people out there that say, well, if you have nothing to hide, why wouldn't you let the government into your house, into your car, into your telephone, up your kitchen?
Because
why wouldn't if you had nothing to hide? How about this? You have nothing to hide, so you're driving down the car in Utah. the car I rent in Salt Lake City. And I get interdicted because I look like an old hippie. And they see Colorado in my eyes, right? So I get interdicted. And they don't like my wise ass. No, I have nothing to discuss with you, officer. Thank you. I hope you're having a great day. But that's all I'm saying. Of course, you can see my license. So, by now, Fido, the drug dog, is there. Fido alerts on my rental car, which has had how many people rent it before me to drive dope from Colorado to anywhere they want. So the drug dog alerts, and the next thing I know, car is seized, I'm arrested, money is taken because I had a rental car. And they have a very sensitive dog. Now, what the hell?
Yeah, and I think that's the whole issue. And I think really as a society, we need to understand that we have rights and that law enforcement or the criminal justice system should not be entitled to subvert those rights simply on fishing expeditions. And, you know, it's very tough for me to say this. I mean, I had a career in law enforcement. My husband spent 30 years as a reserve for Orange County Sheriff's Department. My ex-husband's a police officer, career. My ex-husband's wife is worked in probation. We come from a very pro-law enforcement, public safety, yet I have taught my son, who's 24, not to ever speak to a cop, unless it's maybe a minor traffic accident or something, without an attorney present. If law enforcement called my son to say, I want to come in and interview, I would hire my son an attorney before I would ever let him be interviewed by the police now.
Because I tell people to say, happy to chat with you. Here's my attorney's number. He'll arrange it. She'll arrange it.
That's exactly it. And that's the bottom line. And why is because the system and because law enforcement has changed and we've evolved, Lenny. And I mean, you're a judge and, you know, you're an attorney. And, you know, it used to be that the cops were supposed to just simply gather the facts. We were not the people who determined guilt or innocence. We were the people that were entrusted to get as much information.
End the problem. Collect the data, prevent the problem when you're on a really good day.
Yep. And we've completely changed, and the drug wars changed that. Completely changed that.
I have to tell you, with legalization in the free state of Colorado, in my opinion, there is a palpable change, a belief, commonly held belief that, in fact, now, when a law enforcement person comes and knocks on the door, instead of our first reaction being, oh, son of a bitch, did I leave a joint out? Our first reaction is, officer, what's up? Can I help you?
Yep.
And that is of incalculable value. Why turn the people that could, should, and many want to be our best friends into suspect enemies? What a terrible thing to do.
Oh, absolutely. And we've seen it. I mean, I think the real difficulty for me especially is I believe that law enforcement needs to be reformed from top to bottom. And the good news is we're seeing a lot of very positive aspects. You're starting to see a lot of conflict even within law enforcement. For example, around the issues of the academy. There is a fight in law enforcement about, hey, we need to stop training people in this, everybody's the enemy and you're going to get killed. Back to, no, but seriously,
that's a tough attitude to go to work with in the morning. Wow.
Yeah, but I mean, that's, you know, it's, even back when I was, and it's been many years and it hasn't changed, is, you know, law enforcement is an incredibly difficult, tough job. But if we think that everybody is the enemy, it's going to cause so many of these issues that are going on right now. And the drug war is right at the bottom of it. You know, we just had a very controversial shooting here in L.A. called the Ezell Ford case. And you had a African-American, potentially, I think he was a homeless man, who got killed by LAPD. And the problem was the police commission came back and pointed something out, is LAPD, the officers had no business stopping this gentleman. There was no established probable cause. The policing, in fact, was unconstitutional policing. And because of the unconstitutional policing, it led into an altercation that escalated into the death. Well, what the officers said is they saw this man walking in an area where you had an open-air drug market, and they thought that he may have bought drugs. They thought. And so that was their whole reason for the stop. So we know, and I used to... This is so difficult. I used to really believe that we can reform law enforcement from within. I think it's going to take two different things. One of them is we have to strip law enforcement of power and make them accountable to the Constitution and to the rule of law. We need to basically establish a system where maybe, like surgeons or psychologists or nurses or others, that there's liability insurance that individual officers are forced to carry. And if you get sued too much and you lose your insurance, you can't practice your profession anymore.
Well, I won't be able to practice my profession if I don't stop and pay my bills, which is what we're going to do right now. And then we're going to come back and pick up where we left off here at Time for Hemp.
You are listening to the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. Broadcasting network dedicated to ending the global war on drugs on iHeartRadio. Please share us with your friends.
Serious Seeds is your source for quality cannabis and sativa seeds. Serious Seeds are the creators of legendary strains like AK-47, Bubblegum, Chronic, Cali Mist, and White Russian. The AK-47 is probably the most awarded strain on the planet. The high THC content of AK-47 makes it the perfect medical strain for patients seeking quick pain relief. Cali Mist is an almost pure sativa. Female medical cannabis patients have reported that this strain helps relieve menstrual cramps. Serious Seeds just acquired another Dutch high-quality seed bank, Magus Genetics. From now on, Serious Seeds can offer you even more award-winning strains. The fine folks at Serious Seeds strive to breed the best cannabis genetics that they can find, so patients can rely on the effectiveness of their medicine. Go to SeriousSeeds.com to grow your medicine. That site again is SeriousSeeds.com.
Yes, stay alert with consciousness and be respectful of the world around you. That's all we ask. If everybody did that, we would never, ever, ever be dealing with any of these aspects of a nanny state. And it's nice to know that my government is so concerned about me that they do everything they can to pass a bill after bill after bill to protect me from myself and protect me from my family and protect me from my friends. Good Lord, who's going to protect me from the government? Oh my gosh. Anyway, with that said, I'll pass this joint chat back to my joint friends here on the big joint broadcast on Time for Hemp.
Smoking to be here as always. It occurs to me, sadly for the first time, that the Bill of Rights is a bill. And I think now they're making us pay the bill. We had the rights. Diane.
Oh, yeah, Lenny, you are no if, ands, or buts about it. And, and I think that's the thing that people don't realize. It's, the loss and subversion of our rights really started with search and seizure relative to the drug war. And if you start looking at the history, and then it's almost like the frog being boiled in water. We don't know that we're losing, or that we're dying. And then all of a sudden, it's the frog is dead. And the frog doesn't try to jump out of the hot water because it doesn't recognize it. Well, the drug war started it, and then we had 9/11. And then you had the Patriot Act, the NSA, this whole overreach relative to public safety issues. And we really need to significantly roll the laws back. It's... Go ahead, I'm sorry.
How do we even know if the Patriot Act is good or bad? Nobody's read it all.
No, well, that's exactly it. But we know it's bad because we do have stats on it. And if you start looking at the Patriot Act and what it's been used for, like 95% of all of the stats revert back to that it's being used for narcotics investigations. It's not being used for terrorism.
Do you mean our terrorism information and the tapping of all our phones and the storing of all our hard drives to combat terrorism doesn't combat terrorism, it fights drug dealers?
Exactly. Absolutely. And so, again, it's, we go back to things that we need to really properly start asking the questions. Are we safer with these laws or not? And is it worth Americans living in this over-criminalized police state that we're starting to get to?
Do you want to hear my joke that's not funny?
Sure.
My latest, most effective, best computer hard drive backup strategy. Should I suffer a hard drive crash, I file a Freedom of Information Act against the NSA and just get my backup that they're keeping for me.
That's great, but you're right, it's not funny.
No.
But it's a good joke because it is true. But so we've talked about a lot of the negatives. Let's start talking about some of the positives because we are evolving. Okay, so even though I don't necessarily completely agree with the Gloucester, Massachusetts police chief, at least he is publicly now recognizing that the heroin issues in his community cannot be solved by criminalizing a public health problem. And one of the things that he's done is he's shepherded in what he calls his angel program, that if you are a substance abuser who is addicted, is you get a free pass if you walk into the police station with your drugs and your paraphernalia. And what he does is he assigns you an angel, which is why they call it the angel program, and they work with public health resources in the community to get you into treatment. But the problem is this is one police chief and how many law enforcement agencies that are viewing it in that fashion.
Well, we have the guys up in Aspen. We have the guy in Telluride. It's not zero.
Yeah, no, exactly. So we are. So heroin, interesting enough, is making people realize that all substance abuse should be treated as a public health issue. On another very, very positive point, in Vermont, the head of Department of Corrections literally just said, hey, when it comes to marijuana, it should be regulated as in, adult consumption, medical marijuana. And when it comes to all other drugs, we need to decriminalize like Portugal does, which means it's a complete public health issue, and if you are simply a user of drugs, can never go to prison or jail.
One of the things that a factoid I stumbled on in law school, rich people with heroin addictions do not have problems.
Oh, yeah, exactly. It's an economic resource issue. You know, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And so, you know, so things are changing, and we're moving in the right direction. Even the Office of the Drug Czar has started using terms like harm reduction when they start talking about what's going on in drug policy, although they don't go far enough because they're not funding public health versus enforcement. But this week, from a harm reduction standpoint, is even Congress is now finally looking at taking out the ban from using federal funds to fund syringe exchange programs.
I'm thinking that...
So, you know, is marijuana is what I like to say about... Now, that marijuana has been our entry into having the discussion about the failure of the drug war, but we have to push way past marijuana. And I love our marijuana people, Lenny, don't get me wrong, Casper, but there's this marijuana exceptionalism where marijuana people sometimes kick to the curb other drug users, and they shouldn't. They're trying to distance themselves, but they're using the same stigmatizing, horrific language. And it's going to be problematic because Leitch has always said that what we're afraid of is once we've solved the marijuana issue, that people will ignore all the rest of it.
Our work's cut out for us, and that's why we're here today.
Yeah.
And those people will, I wonder if the people that think it's a marijuana issue only, I wonder if they'll be our easiest or our hardest converts. I wonder.
Yeah.
It might be more dispassionate by the people that said, no, I'm voting for it because I know it's all bull, but not my thing, but it's all bull, so I'm going to vote to legalize.
Yeah. Oh, I agree with you. I mean, I've had this very open discussion with some people in the marijuana movement that basically, you know, only want Leitch to talk about marijuana. It's like, oh, no, you know, and but consequently, though, when you sit there and say, think about prohibition, this isn't about the type of drugs that people are using. This is about prohibition and the failures of it. So my concern, I think that what the Vermont Department of Corrections chief is saying is a very positive thing, and it would be a good first step, but even if we decriminalize all other drugs, you're still going to have the illicit market that is what drives and fuels the violence and other associated harms in our community.
Well, in marijuana alone, I can tell you that what I think I am seeing is pretty much the same people that were buying underground before legalization are the people that are going into the store and buying it in the store.
Yeah.
I think the real problem these days is not an in-state gray market. The challenge is minimizing, preventing the marijuana traveling out of state, the gray market. Now, what will ultimately solve it is when other states legalize it and there's no incentive. Short term, tough challenge.
Yeah, well, you know, and it is, but, you know, what's very, very interesting about the, you know, the whole gray market issue is think about alcohol prohibition. Wasn't it, correct me if I'm wrong, it was Colorado that was the first state during alcohol prohibition that basically said, hey, we're done with the federal government. And it took a few years, but eventually everybody came on board.
You're correct.
And I think that's
memory's correct.
And that's going to the exact same thing's going to happen.
Cracks me up.
Yeah.
Yep, makes sense. Cracks me up, and it fits the pioneering spirit that I've called home since 1975. After learning without knowing it that I was an Army brat based on having moved 500 miles every 5 years. Now I've moved 5 miles in 25, oh shit, pardon my language, but 1975 was a long time ago. Oh.
Yeah.
Painful. No wonder I'm stiff.
Almost 40 years.
Oh, man, I need medicine.
Well, we also need to wrap this up. We're down to our last couple of minutes. This gives us a chance to give a shout-out to our favorite URLs. Diane?
www.leap.cc, and I just briefly want to talk about Leap is getting ready, and we haven't done it yet. It's coming up as we're releasing our documentary, Caravan for Peace and Justice, based on the Caravan for Peace from 2012. And so, I'd love to get Steve Downing and myself or Sam Sassabar on Time for Hemp when that happens. In California, Leap is, with myself and Steve Downing and Jim Gray, we're heading our California campaign to raise money for Leap in order to get tons and tons of Leap speakers out here coming up for our 2016 election, because we will have a ballot initiative. So it's our turn to vote to legalize.
All righty. And Your Honor?
I'm not sure which is worse, having elections or not having them.
I
I'm going to give a shout-out today to what either is or needs to be the Utah chapter of LEAP, Utah LEAP speakers, and Utah Normal, with my hope that I don't need you in the next week, but you need to be there.
And I want to remind people that we are not just a 1-hour broadcast, but we are 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Please keep us tuned in and check out the Google Plus app. You can download into your smartphones. We also have a SoundCloud app, an iHeart app, and all kinds of other apps that make it possible to keep up with us and know when it is time to take Time for Hemp.
The money that they spend. Take another look and spend some time for him. Don't cut trees for paper, cause it hurts the environment. Stop deforestation, yes, it's time for him. Whoa, an acre of hemp makes 20